The date stone had barely left the merchant's fingers when the leaves above him began to tremble. A moment earlier, he had been resting beneath an enormous tree in a silent garden beside the road. His meal was simple: bread, a little cheese, and a handful of dates. His animal drank nearby. The afternoon heat pressed against the low garden wall, and nothing moved beyond the shade. Then the air changed. The cup in the merchant's hand became still. Dust began to circle several paces away, though no wind had entered the garden. A thin line of dark blue smoke rose from the earth, twisting slowly upward, bronze light glowing along its edges. The smoke widened. It climbed higher than the branches. Shoulders formed within it, then arms marked by ancient bands, and finally a stern face that seemed older than the road itself. The merchant tried to stand, but fear held him against the trunk of the tree. The figure looked down at him. His voice was not a shout, yet every leaf above them shook. "Stand, son of Adam," said the genie, "for your journey has reached its end." The merchant's mouth went dry. Still, he answered with the courtesy of a man who understood that calm words might be the last shelter left to him. "My lord," he said, "what wrong have I done to you?" The genie pointed toward the scattered date stones. "You cast one of these into the air. It struck my son as he passed unseen beside this place. By your careless hand, his life was taken, and I have come to claim yours in return." For several heartbeats, the merchant heard nothing except the beating of his own heart. He stared at the small stones in the dust. They looked harmless, ordinary, impossible instruments of such a terrible accident. He had seen no traveler. He had heard no footsteps. He had meant no harm. But the genie stood before him like a storm given shape, and there was no court, no witness, and no road fast enough to carry him away. To understand how he had reached that moment, the story returned to the morning when his journey began. At dawn, the eastern sky had turned pale and silver. The merchant left while the streets were still cool. Shop doors remained closed, and the smell of warm bread followed him until the road curved toward open country. For the first part of his journey, he traveled with a modest caravan. The men carried rolled carpets, sealed jars, dyed wool, and wooden boxes that clicked softly as the animals crossed the stones. The merchant listened more than he spoke. He watched the clouds, checked the water skins, and noticed every change in the road. After several days, the caravan divided. Some travelers turned north toward a river town, while the merchant continued alone along a quieter road. He crossed a broad, sunlit plain where low hills rested along the horizon and thorn trees cast small islands of shade. He thought of ordinary things: his accounts, the price of indigo, and the painted wooden bird he had promised to bring his youngest child. Near midday, he saw a cluster of green trees ahead. Shade was welcome, and a wise traveler rested before exhaustion arrived. He found a small garden enclosed by a low wall of sun-baked earth. Date palms rose above it, and one enormous tree spread its branches over a shallow source of water. The merchant led his animal to drink, loosened the straps of his load, and washed the dust from his hands and face. Then he sat beneath the great tree and ate bread, a little cheese, and several dates. Without thought, he flicked the date stones away from the cloth on his lap. One landed near the roots, another in the grass, and a third beyond the shade. They seemed no more important than pebbles. He lifted his cup and closed his eyes for a moment. Then the air changed. The leaves trembled without wind, and his animal lifted its head from the water. The merchant opened his eyes and saw the first thin thread of dark blue smoke rising from the earth. Within moments, it had become the towering figure whose accusation had opened the tale. The story had caught up with the moment at which it had begun. The merchant remained beneath the tree, facing the genie. His cup trembled in his hand. The accusation had been spoken, and now the genie waited for his answer. The merchant looked once at the scattered date stones, then back at the grieving figure. Nothing in his careless gesture had carried anger, yet its consequence stood before him. At last, he forced himself to speak. His voice was quiet. "My lord," he said slowly, "I did not see your son. I did not know that anyone stood there. I intended no harm." The genie's expression did not change. "Intention does not return the lost," he replied. The merchant lowered his eyes. He understood that argument would not soften grief. In that ancient place, far from witnesses, there was no court to which he could appeal. He considered running, but the thought vanished as soon as it appeared. A creature formed from smoke could have crossed the garden before he reached the wall. He considered offering gold, but gold held no value for a grieving immortal. He considered begging, then chose instead to speak with what dignity fear had left him. So the merchant drew one deep breath and asked a question. "If my life is required," he said, "grant me 1 year." The genie's eyes narrowed. "1 year? 1 year," the merchant repeated. "I have money that belongs to others. I have agreements not yet completed. I have children who depend upon me in a household that does not know where I am. Let me return home. I will settle every debt, place my affairs in order, and say farewell. On this same day next year, I will return to this tree and submit to your judgment." The garden became very quiet. The genie studied him. Perhaps he expected deception. Perhaps he had known many human beings and had learned how quickly promises dissolved when danger was no longer visible. Perhaps, beneath his anger, he was curious. "What pledge can a mortal give," he asked, "when the road is long and fear travels faster than honor?" The merchant placed one hand over his heart. "I give you my word before the one who sees every hidden thing," he said. "I will return." The smoke around the genie twisted and settled. His great form seemed to lean closer. "If you do not return," he said, "your word will follow you wherever you hide. I understand. And if you do return, you know what awaits you. I understand." The genie lifted one hand. The bronze light brightened. For a moment, the garden disappeared behind a curtain of smoke. The merchant closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the figure was gone. Only the date stones remained. The merchant sat beneath the tree for a long time. He did not finish his meal. He did not know whether the encounter had been a dream, but dust still circled where the genie had stood, and the animal beside the water trembled. At last, he gathered his belongings, tied the satchel closed, and left the dates where they were. Then he turned toward home. The road he had traveled that morning had belonged to an ordinary man with ordinary business. The road he now followed belonged to someone carrying a year in his hands, measuring every day against a promise made beneath a tree. The merchant returned to his city more quickly than he had planned. When he entered his courtyard, his family was surprised to see him. At first, there was joy. Children ran toward him. Servants called out greetings. Someone brought cool water. Someone else asked whether the roads had been unsafe. The merchant looked at the familiar fountain, the vine along the wall, and the lamp niche beside the door. Everything appeared unchanged, yet he had returned as a different man. For the first evening, he said little. He embraced his children, ate with his family, and listened to the small stories of the household. A cracked jar, a neighbor's wedding, a stubborn goat, and a roof tile loosened by wind. Those ordinary details felt precious beyond measure. Later, when the house was quiet, he told his closest family what had happened. They did not believe him at first. Then they saw his face. Grief entered the house like cold air beneath a door. His wife begged him not to return. His children asked why a promise made to a genie should bind a human being. Friends suggested that he move to another city, cross the sea, or seek protection from a ruler, a scholar, or a holy man. The merchant listened to every suggestion. He did not dismiss their fear, because it was born from love. Yet each time he imagined breaking his word, he remembered the silent garden and the question the genie had asked: what pledge could a mortal give? The merchant knew that he had intended no harm. He knew the judgment was severe, but he also knew that he had asked for time, received it, and sealed his request with a promise. If he used that gift only to escape, then every day of the year would become stolen. So he began to prepare. He opened his account books and checked every line. Debts were paid. Goods held in trust were returned. Money owed to absent partners was sealed in labeled purses. He wrote instructions for the care of his household, freed a servant who had worked faithfully for many years, and gave quiet gifts to people who would never know why they had come. He also continued to live. That was perhaps the strangest part of the year. Morning still arrived. Bread still had to be purchased. A child still lost a sandal. Rain collected in the courtyard. The merchant still smiled sometimes, then remembered, then smiled again, because sorrow did not cancel every moment of tenderness. He visited old friends and sat longer than usual. He walked through the market without hurry. He noticed the hands of craftsmen, the voices of fruit sellers, and the changing colors of cloth in the sun. He took his children beyond the city walls and showed them how to find direction by the stars. As the months passed, the household began to count time without speaking of it. Summer deepened. The nights grew cooler. The pomegranate tree lost its leaves. Winter rain tapped on the roof. Spring returned, bringing green shoots between the stones. The merchant did not seek danger, but neither did he hide from the calendar. On the final night, his family remained awake with him. No one knew what words were sufficient. Advice had ended. Argument had ended. Only love remained. Before dawn, the merchant dressed in the same indigo robe he had worn on the earlier journey. He took the same satchel, though this time it held almost nothing. Bread, water, a few dates he did not intend to eat, and a folded letter for his family in case no traveler returned with news. At the courtyard door, his youngest child gave him a painted wooden bird, the very gift he had once promised to bring home. "Take it," the child said. "So you remember the way back." The merchant placed it carefully in his satchel. Then he stepped into the street. The city was quiet. Dawn was only a pale line above the roofs. Behind him, the door closed softly. He did not look back at once. When he finally did, he saw the house standing beneath the fading stars and held the image in his mind. Then he began the long return to the tree. The merchant reached the garden on the appointed day. The great tree stood exactly as he remembered it. Its roots broke the dry earth in long curves. The shallow water reflected the sky, and the date palms stirred faintly above the wall. He arrived early. Honor had brought him back, but honor did not remove fear. His hands shook when he tied his animal. He sat beneath the tree, placed the leather satchel beside him, and watched sunlight move across the ground. He thought of leaving. The road was open, and no wall surrounded him. But he remained. Near midday, he saw a traveler approaching from the west. The man was old, with a long white beard and an olive cloak. He walked with a staff, and beside him stepped a graceful gazelle with dark, watchful eyes. The old man greeted the merchant and asked why he sat alone in such a remote place with sorrow on his face. The merchant told him the story. The old man looked toward the scattered shade and then at the gazelle. "This is a strange matter," he said. "I will stay and see what comes of it." The merchant warned him that the genie might be dangerous. "Perhaps," said the old man, "but no one should wait alone for a fearful hour." Not long afterward, a second traveler appeared. He had a short gray beard, a rust-red robe, and two black hounds at his side. They were large animals, but calm. They sat when he sat and rose when he rose. He heard the merchant's story and also chose to remain. Then, as the afternoon began to soften, a third old man arrived. He wore a deep navy cloak and carried a small brass lantern, though the sun was still up. A patient white mule followed him, its saddle blanket woven with blue geometric patterns. He, too, listened. He, too, stayed. The four men sat beneath the tree. Their animals waited nearby. For a brief time, they spoke of roads, wells, and weather, as travelers did. Yet each knew they were listening for another sound. It came near sunset. The garden darkened, though the sky remained clear. Smoke rose from the same patch of earth. The gazelle pressed close to the first old man. The two hounds lowered their heads. The white mule gave a soft, uneasy breath. The genie took shape, taller and more terrible in the fading light. "You returned," he said to the merchant. "I gave my word," the merchant answered. The first old man stood and bowed. "Mighty One," he said, "before you pass judgment, hear my story and the story of this gazelle. If you find it more wondrous than the matter before you, grant me 1/3 of the merchant's life." The genie looked at the old man, then at the gazelle. "Speak," he said. And so, beneath the first stars of evening, the old man began. "This gazelle," said the first old man, resting one hand gently upon the animal's neck, "was once my wife." The merchant looked up in surprise. The gazelle's dark eyes remained fixed upon the ground. The old man continued, "I married when I was young. My wife was clever, capable, and respected in our household. For many years, however, we had no child. In time, I accepted that my house might pass to a nephew or a distant cousin. Among my servants was a young woman of good character. By the customs of that distant age, she later bore me a son. I will not pretend that this brought peace to my house. My wife concealed her pain, but pain concealed can become a room with no windows. Instead of speaking, she allowed resentment to grow in silence. My son was bright and gentle. He followed me through the storerooms, asking the name of every spice and the origin of every piece of cloth. His mother cared for him with great devotion. I believed time would soften the household. I was wrong. 1 year, business called me away for many months. Before leaving, I asked my wife to protect the boy and his mother. She agreed. Her voice was calm. I trusted her. But my wife had studied secret arts from an old book hidden in a chest. While I was away, she used those arts against the two people she envied. She transformed the boy's mother into a cow and the boy into a young calf. Then she sent them to the care of our herdsman and told the household that both mother and child had vanished. When I returned, she met me at the door wearing the expression of someone who had practiced sorrow. "The servant died during your absence," she told me, "and the boy ran away." We searched, but no trace of him was found. I mourned. I searched the roads. I sent messages to neighboring towns. I offered a reward. Months passed with no news. Then came the season of a great family feast. According to the custom of our house, I told the herdsman to bring a fine animal from the herd. He brought a healthy cow. The moment the cow saw me, she strained against the rope and cried in a way that did not sound like the cry of an animal. Tears ran from her eyes. She lowered her head at my feet. I felt a sorrow I could not explain. "Take this one back," I told the herdsman. "Bring another." My wife objected. She insisted that this cow be chosen. Her insistence should have warned me, but I knew nothing of enchantment. I thought only that she was concerned with the household arrangements. The animal was taken away and prepared according to custom. No details are needed. Only afterward did I learn that I had unknowingly allowed a terrible wrong to be completed. When the servants found that the cow was strangely thin beneath its healthy appearance, my wife demanded another animal. The herdsman brought a young calf. The calf broke from his hand and ran directly to me. It pressed its head against my knees and made a sound so full of grief that the whole courtyard fell silent. This time I refused. "I will not permit it," I said. "Return the calf to the herd," my wife argued. I would not change my mind. The herdsman led the calf away. The feast continued with other food, but I could not forget the animal's eyes. The following morning, the herdsman came to me privately. "Master," he said, "my daughter wishes to speak with you. She knows something about the calf." His daughter was a quiet young woman who had learned certain protective arts from her grandmother. When I entered their house, she looked at me with both pity and caution. "The calf is your son," she said. I thought grief had made her cruel. Then she told me everything. The old man paused. The gazelle shifted beneath his hand. The genie listened without movement. The night grew deeper around the tree. The herdsman's daughter led me to the enclosure. The old man continued. The calf stood at the far side. She spoke a prayer, mixed water with herbs, and traced a small circle in the dust. Then she sprinkled the water over the calf and said, "By the truth that lies beneath false appearances, return to the form that belongs to you." The air seemed to fold. The calf staggered, and where it had stood, my son appeared. He was older than when I had left him, thinner and frightened. But he was alive. I embraced him, and for a long time neither of us could speak. When he had rested, He told me how my wife had summoned him and his mother, spoken words from the hidden book, and changed them. He remembered the bewilderment of losing his human voice. He remembered being driven from his own home. He remembered his mother trying to comfort him, though she could no longer speak. I asked the herdsman's daughter whether she could also restore the boy's mother. She lowered her eyes. "I am sorry," she said. "That life has already passed beyond my art. My grief was joined by anger. I wanted immediate judgment, yet the young woman stopped me. Anger is another enchantment," she said. "It can change a person just as surely as magic. Decide carefully what form you wish your justice to take." She agreed to help me on 2 conditions. First, that my son would one day be permitted to choose whether he wished to marry her. Second, that my wife would not be destroyed, but transformed into an animal and kept under my protection, so that she might live with the consequences of what she had done without further harming anyone. I agreed. My son, when he had recovered, chose gladly to marry the herdsman's daughter. She had returned his life to him, but more than that, she had spoken to him with kindness when he was helpless. Their marriage became a peaceful one. As for my wife, the young woman confronted her with the hidden book. My wife denied everything until my son entered the room. Then fear broke through her pride. The herdsman's daughter sprinkled the same enchanted water and spoke another set of words. My wife became the gazelle you see beside me now. Years passed. My son and his wife built a household of their own. I traveled often to visit them. The gazelle remained with me. I did not mistreat her. Each morning, I gave her water. Each evening, I made sure she was sheltered. Justice had been done, but cruelty would not undo cruelty. Recently, my son left on a journey and did not return at the expected time. I set out to search for him, bringing the gazelle with me because I could not leave her unattended. That search led me to this road, and this road led me to the merchant beneath your tree. This is my story, mighty one. Is it not strange? For the first time, the genie's expression changed. The smoke around his shoulders settled. "It is strange," the genie said, "and it carries a lesson within it. I grant you 1/3 of the merchant's life." The merchant breathed, though he had not realized he had been holding his breath. The second old man rose. The 2 black hounds stood beside him. "Mighty one," he said, "these hounds were once my brothers. Hear our story, and if it is more wondrous still, grant me another third." The genie turned his bronze-lit gaze toward him. "Speak." The second old man rested both hands upon his staff. "My father," he began, "was a merchant with 3 sons. I am the youngest. When he died, he divided his property equally among us. Each son received 1,000 gold pieces, a modest shop, and enough goods to begin a respectable life. My eldest brother was restless. He sold his shop, purchased rare merchandise, and joined a ship bound for distant ports. For a year, I heard nothing. Then one rainy evening, a ragged man sat outside my shop asking for food. I did not recognize him until he spoke my name. It was my brother. His voyage had failed. A dishonest partner had taken part of his money. A storm had ruined part of his cargo. Illness consumed the rest. He returned with nothing. I brought him home, gave him clean clothes, and divided my own savings with him. We began as equals, I said. Let us begin again as equals. For a time, he worked beside me. Then my second brother made the same choice. He sailed away. certain that he would succeed where the first had failed. A year later, he too returned poor and ashamed. I welcomed him and again divided what I had. We might have lived quietly after that, but the sea continued to call to them. They spoke every evening of distant islands, pearls, fragrant woods, and markets where ordinary cloth could be traded for twice its value. At last, I agreed to travel with them. I did not risk everything. I hid half my savings beneath the floor of my house and took the rest for trade. We purchased goods carefully and boarded a strong ship. The voyage went well. We crossed calm water and reached a prosperous city. Our goods sold at a profit. We bought new cargo and prepared to return home. Near the harbor, I saw a woman dressed in worn clothing. She asked for help. My brothers walked past, but I stopped. There was dignity in her voice despite her poverty. She asked me to take her as my wife and protect her. The request was sudden, yet something in her manner inspired trust. I agreed, and we were married according to the custom of the place. My brothers disliked her from the beginning. They believed she had attached herself to me because of my success. They also saw that my share of the profit was greater than theirs, not through trickery, but because I had chosen safer goods. Jealousy entered their hearts. One night, while the ship moved beneath a moonless sky, they lifted my sleeping wife and me and cast us into the sea. The water closed above us. I remember cold, darkness, and the distant creak of the ship moving away. Then the woman took my hand. "Do not be afraid," she said beneath the water, as clearly as if we stood in a quiet room. A pale light surrounded us. The sea no longer pressed upon my chest. She carried me upward, and in a moment we stood upon a rocky island miles from the ship. She was not an ordinary woman. She was one of the hidden beings of the air and sea. "You showed kindness when I appeared helpless," she told me. "Your brothers answered kindness with betrayal. For what they have done, I will end their lives before dawn." I begged her not to. "They are my brothers," I said. "What they did was terrible, but do not answer one loss with another." She studied me with astonishment. "Even now you defend them?" "I do not defend the deed," I said. "I ask mercy for the people." She agreed to spare them, but not to leave them unchanged. With a sweep of her hand, the island vanished. I found myself standing outside my own house at dawn. The hidden money remained beneath the floor, exactly where I had left it. Several weeks later, 2 black hounds appeared at my door. I knew them at once. My wife's voice came to me upon the wind. "For 10 years, they will wear this form," she said. "Care for them, as you asked that they be spared. When the 10th year ends, seek my sister in the mountains. She will restore them if their hearts have changed." So I took them in. They could not speak, but they understood. During the first years, they were restless and proud. Later, they became quiet. They watched me work to rebuild the business they had nearly destroyed. They saw me share food with them each night. Sometimes I woke and found them beside the door, guarding the house. 10 years have now passed. I am traveling toward the mountains to find the one who can restore them. That journey brought me here. Such is the story of my brothers and the sea. The old man fell silent. One of the black hounds lowered its head against his knee. The genie's stern face softened again. "Your tale is wondrous," he said, "and mercy given in the moment of betrayal is rarer than treasure. I grant you the second third of the merchant's life. The merchant now stood with only one part of the judgment remaining. The third old man lifted his brass lantern, though no flame burned inside it. Mighty One, he said, my tale concerns this white mule, a vanished city, and a lamp that remembers every promise spoken beside it. The genie gestured for him to continue. The third old man placed the brass lantern on the ground between them. This mule, he said, was once my wife, Layla. She was a scholar's daughter, skilled in reading old scripts and repairing damaged books. We lived near a city known for its libraries, where copyists worked by lamplight and travelers brought stories from every road. In the early years of our marriage, we made a promise. Once each month, no matter how busy we became, we would close the shop before sunset, light a single lamp, and speak honestly about anything that had been left unsaid. For many years, we kept that promise. Then prosperity came. My trading journeys grew longer. Layla received more manuscripts than she could restore. We began postponing our evening of honesty, first by a day, then by a week, then by an entire season. Silence filled the spaces where conversation had once lived. One winter, I purchased an old brass lantern from a traveler. Its surface was marked with writing neither of us could read. The traveler warned me that it had come from a vanished city in the salt desert. The lamp remembers promises, he said. Do not light it carelessly. I laughed at the warning and brought it home. Layla examined the inscription for many nights. At last, she translated part of it. What is promised beside this flame must be honored before the flame goes dark. She wanted to test it. I refused. We argued, not truly about the lantern, but about all the words we had delayed for years. In anger, Layla lit the lamp. A blue flame appeared, though there was no oil inside. You promised never to leave a truth unspoken between us, she said. I replied, and you promised never to use knowledge as a weapon. The flame rose higher. The room filled with wind. Pages flew from the tables. The inscription on the lantern shone, revealing a final line we had not translated. Those who accuse without listening shall carry burdens without speech. The wind struck us. When I opened my eyes, I stood outside the city in the form of a gray donkey. Layla stood beside me as a white mule. We could think, but neither of us could speak. A caravan master found us and, believing us to be abandoned animals, took us into his service. For 7 years, we traveled roads we had once known as free people. We carried books, grain, salt, and jars of oil. We learned the weight of burdens placed by strangers. We learned the frustration of understanding words but being unable to answer. Most of all, we learned how easily people mistake silence for emptiness. Some masters were harsh. Others were kind. A child once loosened my rope so I could reach water. An old woman shared figs with Layla each morning. Small mercies became brighter than gold. During the 7th year, our caravan entered the salt desert. A storm erased the road, and we became separated from the others. For 3 days, Layla and I wandered through white emptiness beneath a pale sky. On the 4th night, we saw lights below the horizon. There stood the vanished city. Its walls were unbroken. Its streets were empty. Lamps burned in every window, yet no people moved behind them. In the central library, we found shelves of blank books and a stone table shaped like an open hand. Upon that table rested another brass lantern, twin to the first. When Layla touched it, the blue flame appeared. A voice filled the library. You were given speech and used it to wound. You were given silence and used it to learn. One of you may return to human form now. The other must remain as they are until carried willingly to the place where the first promise was broken. Layla pushed the lantern toward me with her nose. She chose me. I resisted. I wanted her restored instead. But the flame began to fade, and a choice had to be made. I placed my hoof against the lamp. The spell released me. I returned to human form, while Layla remained the white mule you see here. The vanished city began to disappear. Walls became mist. Shelves became dunes. I took the lantern and led Layla away before the last light vanished. Since that night, I have been traveling toward our old home. The journey is long because I refuse to ride her. She has carried enough. I walk beside her, and at every resting place, I tell her the truths I should have spoken years ago. When we reach the room where the first lantern was lit, I will place this lantern beside it. I believe the final promise will then be completed, and Layla will return to her own form. But there is one more wonder. Each time I speak a promise beside this lamp and keep it, a new line appears on its surface. Look. The old man raised the lantern. Across the brass, faint silver writing glimmered like moonlight on water. Tonight, he said, I promised a frightened merchant that I would remain until his judgment was finished. I have kept that promise, and now his name has appeared upon the lamp. The merchant saw letters forming where none had been before. Even the genie leaned closer. The third old man lowered the lantern. This is my tale, a tale of speech, silence, and the burden of words left too long unspoken. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the genie said, Your story is indeed wondrous. More than that, it answers the question with which this meeting began. A promise is not a chain placed upon a person by another. It is a form a person chooses for the soul. The bronze light around the genie brightened. I grant the final third. The merchant heard the words, but at first he did not understand them. The final third had been granted. His whole life, divided into 3 parts by 3 stories, had been returned to him. The genie turned toward the merchant. The garden seemed smaller then, and the night felt less heavy. You came back, he said. I gave my word, the merchant replied. And these travelers remained, though they were free to leave. They showed me kindness. The genie looked toward the date stones still scattered near the roots. Perhaps they were the same stones. Perhaps the road had covered and uncovered them with dust through the year. My grief has not vanished, the genie said. A story cannot restore what was lost. No, said the merchant quietly, but grief that hears only itself becomes a closed chamber. Tonight, I have heard of anger changed into restraint, betrayal answered with mercy, and promises carried across years. I will not add another sorrow to the world. The genie raised both hands. The smoke around him rose in a great spiral, but there was no threat in it then. The branches of the tree swayed. The shallow water rippled. Bronze light moved across the faces of the 4 men and the waiting animals. You are free, the genie told the merchant. Return to your house. Carry your days carefully. Small acts may travel farther than the hand that begins them. The merchant bowed until his forehead nearly touched the earth. When he looked up, The genie was already dissolving into smoke. His face was the last thing to fade. Not angry then, but distant and solemn. The smoke narrowed into a single line and sank into the ground. The garden became still. For several moments, none of the travelers spoke. Then the merchant began to laugh. It was not loud laughter. It was the breathless sound of a person who had prepared to leave the world and had unexpectedly been given the road home. Tears came with it. The old men smiled. The first old man gave him water. The second shared bread. The third lifted the brass lantern, and the merchant's name still shone faintly upon it. They remained beneath the tree until dawn. The merchant asked each old man to visit his home one day, so he might repay their kindness. The first said he had to continue searching for his son. The second had to reach the mountain before winter closed the paths. The third had to bring Layla to the room of the first promise. Their roads led in different directions. At sunrise, they said farewell. The first old man walked east with the gazelle. The second turned north with the two black hounds. The third followed the western road beside the white mule, carrying the lantern that remembered. The merchant stood alone once more beneath the great tree, but he was no longer waiting for judgment. He took the painted wooden bird from his satchel. In the morning light, its simple colors seemed brighter than any jewel. Then he began the journey home. The road home was the same road, yet every familiar shape felt renewed. The merchant noticed the silver leaves of thorn trees. He heard larks rising from the dry grass. He tasted the coolness of water as though drinking for the first time. He did not hurry at first. Gratitude had its own pace. As the city appeared on the horizon, he imagined the courtyard door, the fountain, and the vine along the wall. He imagined the people inside, trying not to count the days since his departure. By late afternoon, he reached the gate. A guard recognized him and called his name. Word traveled ahead through the streets. Before the merchant reached his own door, it opened. His family ran toward him. There were questions, tears, laughter, and hands that touched his shoulders as though to prove he was real. The youngest child searched his face, then noticed the painted wooden bird in his hand. "You remembered the way back," the child said. "Yes," answered the merchant, "and 3 strangers helped me find it." In the years that followed, the merchant told the story many times. He told it not to make himself appear brave, for he admitted that he had been afraid. He told it because people should know that a promise could lead a person into danger, but honor could also call forth unexpected companions. He kept a bowl of dates in his courtyard, yet he never again threw a date stone without looking where it might fall. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, a traveler arrived with news. One said that an old man with a gazelle had found his son in a town beyond the eastern hills. Another said that 2 black hounds had been seen entering a mountain pass and that 3 brothers had later come down together. A third spoke of a scholar and his wife reopening a bookshop near the old libraries, with 2 brass lanterns hanging beside the door. Whether every piece of news was true, the merchant could not know. Stories changed as they traveled, yet he chose to believe that mercy, once set upon a road, might reach its destination. And so our own road through this tale had reached its end. The garden was quiet again. The great tree held the night in its branches. 4 sets of footprints had faded from the dust, and the moon shone upon an empty path. You do not need to follow that path any farther tonight. Let the merchant continue toward his home. Let the three old men continue toward theirs. Let the lantern grow dim. Let the city gates close gently beneath the stars. Take one slow breath, then another. There is nothing left to solve, nothing left to carry. Only the old road, the quiet tree, and the soft memory of a promise kept.